Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Average Joe. And today I have the esteemed guest, Wes Beech, Plasmatics, Wendy Williams. You are one of my dream guests. I wanted to talk to you for years. Thanks for coming on. How you doing?
Great. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Made it through the hurricane all right?
Yeah, we made it through the hurricane. We had to evacuate, so I'm up north, but everything's good down there. And yeah, what was supposed to hit Fort Myers was supposed to hit us, but it went south. So unfortunately, the people in Fort Myers and I know someone in Venice, they got hit pretty bad too. But yeah, but I'm up north now. I have to come up here anyway, and I'm here talking to you. So
Good. All right.
before we get into the history, what's new with Wes Beech?
Well, not too much. I still write and play for my own amusement pretty much. Currently, I'm working on a recording of "It's My Life" with it's going to have Ace Van Johnson from LA Guns play guitar on it, and Time Down from Faster Pussycat's going to sing on it. I got original Plasmatics drummer on the track, TC Tolliver. He
Awesome,
laid down the drums, and then Wendy's bass player, Greg Smith, is going to play bass on it as well. So I'm working on that.
cool.
So that should be cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Hmm.
So let's go way back. How did it all start with the Plasmatics? And I'll tell you when I jumped in as far as my fandom, but how did it start with you?
Well, it was as simple as answering an ad in a Village Voice looking for the world's fastest rhythm guitar player. And at the time, the band I was in had just broken up, so I was looking for something else, another project to play with. And funny thing was, I'd seen the Plasmatics on their first gig at CBGB's. A friend of mine asked me if I wanted to go down there and check out a band that his aunt's boyfriend was playing in. So I went down to see him, and musically, I really didn't care for him too much. But Wendy was absolutely riveting stage performer, and the rest of the band was very visually attractive. So I thought that was interesting. So
So was Richie Stotts in the band at this point, or
yes,
what
yeah.
about Juan Beauvoir?
No, no,
Juan Beauvoir.
he joined the band later. It was
Okay,
Chosei Funahara was the original bass player.
okay. So
Steve
what kind of
Deutsch was the
music were you
drummer.
into?
I was in a punk rock band,
All right,
and we had been playing around the circuit, CBGB's, Max's Kansas City, various other little clubs around Manhattan.
right,
But we could never get a break. We were on the like Tuesday, Wednesday night circuit. So
all right. So
after,
what were your musical influences leading up to this? How'd you get into punk and
well, I saw the New York Dolls open for Mott the Hoople, and that just totally blew my mind. And Johnny Thunders has been my favorite guitar player of all time. I thought he was just incredible, and I started hanging out at CBGB's regularly and checking out all the bands and stuff. So I was very influenced by all of them, the Dead Boys, Ramones, all the whole circuit down there in New York. It was kind of like Paris in the 20s. It
yeah,
was a wild time.
yeah, that's crazy. So I start getting wind of Plasmatics. Wendy started getting a lot of press with smashing the guitars and having the electric tape on her chest and the visual aspect of it. When did things really start to take off for you guys? And yeah, go from there.
Well, it really took off right at the beginning. When I first joined the band, the first gig we played at CBGB's was a packed house. There was lines down the street. I mean, the word was out on Wendy early, so it really just started right then and there, and just kept building and building.
Yeah. So then I'm sorry. Go.
The problem was the band was just too outrageous. Record companies were afraid of us. The promoters were kind of afraid of us. Everybody was afraid of us. We were too threatening. Wendy was too threatening to the establishment.
And how was the band dynamic? I mean, how was Wendy as a person? How was Richie?
Oh, great, great. The band was great. Richie was like the brother I never had. Wendy was like an older sister. She was real protective of the band. She'd always make sure we got everything on the rider we were supposed to get. She'd look out for us, and she was just a total professional. She was
Yeah.
constantly working on her craft and singing. I mean, the typical rehearsal was we'd show up and would run through the set like it was an actual gig, and would go through the whole set till the end of the set. Would all be sweating and panting. Wendy would look at us and she'd go, "Okay, let's do it again." We couldn't say no to her, even though we were totally exhausted.
Right. So I remember I got the Butcher Baby single. I got the early albums. The one song that really started hooked me in because I liked punk, but I was more, mainly Ramones, Sex Pistols. But when you recorded Master Plan, that
Hmm.
started hooking me in as a fan because that song is masterful. So
Thanks.
yeah, what so Jean Beauvoir's in the band at this time. I'm sensing that's leading more towards the heavy metal approach at this point.
Well, it was just a natural progression.
Yeah.
We got out of the kind of the punk rock thing, and we were always listening to other music, and Wendy liked the heavier music, and so that's where we kind of took on that heavy metal direction. And I always like to say it's like when we learned that fourth chord, and our songwriting became more complex, and the lyrics became more complex. The music became heavier, and I think it was just a natural progression.
Yeah, so that was a great album, Beyond the Valley of 1984. At what point now does Wendy strike up the friendship with Lemmy? Can you give us any background on that?
Well, we were getting ready to record our first album, and
All
we
right,
went
this is after Metal Priestess.
this is before Metal Priestess,
This is
actually.
before Metal Priestess. All right,
But
yeah,
we were doing our first album, New Hope for the Wretched, and we were
okay,
on Stiff Records,
yeah,
and they recommended Jimmy Miller as a producer. So he had produced Rolling Stones. He was a famed producer for the Rolling Stones, and he had just produced Motorhead's Bomber album and Overkill. So we
okay,
listened to that, and to hear his production style, and we really liked Motorhead. So that's kind of our introduction to Motorhead. Unfortunately, Jimmy Miller at this point of his career was kind of on the downside. He had a serious drug habit that, unbeknownst to us, so he was absent from the studio a lot of the time.
all
And
right,
we went to see Motorhead the first time they played in New York. They opened for Ozzy Osbourne at the Palladium in New York.
okay.
So we saw them, were blown away, and of course Ozzy with Randy Rhoads, and he totally blew me away.
Yeah, yeah. I saw him in that too. I saw him with Def Leppard when they on their second album. I didn't see Motorhead until I think I saw the second show that Brian Robertson played, and it wasn't good. But no, but
Brian was a cool guy, but he was not really cut out for Motorhead,
yeah, they
unfortunately.
had the whole bomber rig, and they didn't even light it up.
Right.
They played like a half hour and got off the stage. I was like, what? I mean, I had no sleep till Hammersmith. So Wendy decides to do this thing with Lemmy. How did you feel about that?
Well, I thought it was really cool. Motorhead had done that single with Girls School, "Please Don't Touch," and that was
Right.
great. I thought. So I thought this was going to be great. So the song we were going to do was "Stand by Your Man" by Tammy Wynette.
Yeah.
So we worked it up, and we had a meeting with Motorhead. We were going to rehearse at a rehearsal studio in New York. So we show up there. We're waiting for Motorhead to show up, and they had just come in from some gig somewhere, so they were all wiped out. They didn't want to rehearse. They were too wiped out. So we said, okay. So we're going to record in Toronto.
All right.
So the idea was Fast Eddie Clark was going to produce the session, and then he was going to play a guest guitar solo on it. So we get on the plane to go to Toronto. I sit next to Eddie, and the whole plane right over, he's telling me about his guitars and how cool they are, and I should check them out. And he's gonna do this solo on the record. And he's just going crazy. So we get to the airport, and we go to baggage claim. They unload all the instruments. Eddie runs over, grabs the guitar case. He goes to me. Oh, look at this! You got to check this guitar out. This is so cool. I said, okay. He opens it up. It's a bass. He says, okay, okay, this one's got to be my guitar. He runs over to the next case, pulls it over, opens it up. It's another bass. So he's the third one. He goes, grabs it, pulls it over, opens it up. It's another bass. So he slams the case closed. He's totally pissed off, and he just walks away. Motorhead's manager's standing there. He sees him walking away, and these three bass cases sitting there. And he's looking, he's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do?
Yeah. So
The session started off on the wrong foot right there.
yeah, is it true that that led to him leaving Motorhead? Was he that pissed off about it, or is that just a wives' tale?
Well, I think that just exacerbated the whole situation. That I think he was planning on leaving. He was not happy with the way things were going.
Yeah,
So
I
that
guess
was just like the
money
straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah. At this point, how was the money for the Plasmatics?
Well, the money was all right. We were made most of our money touring because we didn't get any airplay. We didn't sell that many records, but that's how we made our money touring. So we were on the road quite a bit of the time.
Okay. So now we go. There's certain points in my musical life that just blew my mind. Like when I first saw Kiss Alive, when I there's but this definitely ranks in my top five. When you guys were on Second City Television with John Candy, the Fish and Musician, when Metal Priestess was released, and you played the Doom song, it was incredible. I still go back and watch it on YouTube almost weekly. Can you tell us about that and tell us about the experience?
It
I
was
mean, to me, that's iconic. To me, that's like my Beatles on Ed Sullivan moment. Honestly,
thanks. That was a great time. We had such a cool time. That was in Edmonton, Canada. So we went up there to do it. And John Candy was crazy, man. He was on he was just on the whole time we were there, always cracking jokes and laughing and just having a good time. And the rest of the cast, the SCTV, which I was a big fan of at the time,
yeah,
and they were all really cool.
yeah,
And we played the song live
yeah.
right
It was
there.
played live. I remember that guy. Who was the guy that ran across the stage with the fire extinguisher? Even that, like, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, that was one of our road crew guys,
Okay, yeah, that was great.
Cappadocia.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and I mean, if you look at that cast, it was like, I mean, Eugene Levy and John Candy and Catherine O'Hara, Martin Short. I mean, just yeah, what a great show.
Yeah, it was great. And that was just a really fun experience. And actually, I think the song came out better on that show than it did on the recording. I wasn't really happy with the way it came out on Metal Priestess.
Okay, so I love Metal Priestess. th- so is Rod Swenson like what's his involvement with the band at all this time? And also Jean Beauvoir leads before this, correct?
Uh, yep, yep. He leaves right before that.
All right, was
He
there
wanted
bad
to
blood
pursue a
there?
solo. No, he wanted to pursue a solo career.
Okay,
And some people were telling them that the Plasmatics weren't going to do anything or go anywhere, so they kind of convinced him to leave. But it was amicable. There was no bad blood there.
yeah. And by the way, on at Second City, you like dressed as a vampire was
Oh, with the cape and
yeah, no,
everything.
it kicked ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally kicked ass. So so what's is Rod Swenson like your manager or
Yes, he's the manager.
okay,
He was with Wendy. It was his whole concept and of the band. He put it together.
okay,
He was a actually graduated from Yale University. He was a conceptual artist,
all right.
and Plasmatics was really a conceptual art piece. So most of the ideas and things were his, and he wrote the lyrics to the songs, and his involvement was very important to the band.
Yeah. So I mean, the Metal Priestess blew me away. So are you? But I wasn't. Who did you tour for this? Did you
Yeah. Oh yeah.
did you headline or did you open up for another band?
We headlined.
Okay.
We played a lot of a lot of big theaters on that tour. We played
Okay.
the Central Park Festival
All right.
in Manhattan on that tour.
So now this leads to the natural progression to Coup d'etat, and it's produced by Dieter Dirks, Scorpions fame, and you go full on heavy metal. And I saw you guys open up for Kiss in Dubuque, Iowa, and it's the greatest show I've ever been to. I,
Uh,
in fact,
yeah.
my girl, I was dating a girl for a few weeks. She dumped me because she wanted to go to party, and I said, "F you, I'm going to see Kiss." And that was it. And Kiss was, as you know, Kiss was kind of at the bottom at this point
Right.
for the
Yeah.
creep. But what a great show! So tell us about what was the mindset going in the coup d'état? How did you pick Dieter Dirks? What we led you to go full on heavy metal?
Well, like I said, it was a natural progression, and Metal Priestess was kind of that transitional record between the punk and the metal. So there's a lot of metal influence on Metal Priestess, and then the songwriting just became heavier and more metal oriented. And we got signed to Capitol Records,
Right.
and it was Capitol who suggested Dieter Dirks to us. So he came in, and we spent 2 weeks. It was like going to recording boot camp with Dieter, because we would rehearse for 10 hours a day with maybe two 20-minute breaks. And he would play this click track through the PA system so loud that, I couldn't sleep at night. I'd hear this click just pounding in my head. But it was a great experience. So for 2 weeks, we rehearsed the songs till we had them down perfectly. So we fly over to Germany, and the idea is we were going to record the backing tracks before Wendy came over. So we spent the first day. We spent a whole day just getting a snare drum sound. Our drummer TC Tolliver's arm was sore just from hitting the snare all day. I
Wow.
mean, Dieter was just such a perfectionist, which was really good and really pushed us. So then the second day we get out, we play the songs through, and on the third day we record all the backing tracks. And we think, okay, this is great. Everything went great. We got all the backing tracks done. Wendy's going to come in. We're going to do the overdubs, and we'll be done. So Dieter looks at us. He goes, "Okay, that was really good. Now we're going to record the album." So we so we started all over from square one.
Yeah. So a couple songs. I mean, the album is great. The beginning of "Put Your Love in Me." Who thought of that mellow intro and going into the scream?
Oh, that was Richie Statz's
Okay.
song.
Yeah.
He wrote the song and that intro. And that's kind of like an AC/DC, I think, type song.
Right.
And then Dieter just encouraged Wendy screaming.
Yeah, and then you do your throwback to Motorhead by doing a "No Class" on the album, but all the other, I mean, so the song "Rock and Roll" is Wendy singing rock and roll or F and roll on the album?
I think she snuck in a couple effing
Yeah,
rolls on
yeah, okay,
that.
yeah.
Just to mess with them.
Another song that's awesome. I mean, they're all great. This is one of my favorite albums. "Country Fairs." That again. Now you wrote that tune.
Right, I
Yeah.
wrote that.
So
Yeah.
it starts out kind of mellow, and then it just goes.
Right, just goes heavy and dark. And,
Yeah, and the lyrical content still stands the test of time today. She was singing about things that people are, still concerned about today.
right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good song.
Yeah,
That was my father's favorite song, actually.
yeah, it's great. Uh,
Uh-huh.
so then you do the video for "The Damned." Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was another pretty wild shoot. We did that in the Arizona desert outside of Phoenix, and I remember me and Richie standing there watching Wendy on top of the bus, thinking like, here's our whole career there. If she falls off that bus, we're done. But Wendy wasn't afraid of anything, and she wanted to do all her own stunts, and she had no fear. She loved doing that.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah, it's a great video. Was it hot or cold?
Oh, it was really hot. It was hot in the
Yeah,
desert. It was like 90 some odd degrees there, and we
yeah,
were out there. We had to sign waivers because they had helicopters out there, and it was just after the Twilight Zone movie where they had that
right. Yeah,
accident on the set there, and some actors were killed, and
yeah.
we had to sign waivers and things because of the helicopters, and
Okay.
it was wild. It was wild. Then we played. We had the band play in the back of a pickup truck driving across the desert. And I'll tell you what, that's a lot harder than it looks. Because you're bouncing around trying to, keep your balance and look like you're playing.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. We had a great time on that shoot.
All right. So now you're on tour with Kiss. Tell us about that. Did you interact with so this is where it really, I've been fascinated with this period. So you're on tour with Kiss. How was that? And did you interact with the band at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. We talked with them, hung out a little bit with them, and Paul, I don't think was a big fan of Wendy.
Right.
Uh, And I think, part of that might have been just professional jealousy because we were getting better reviews in a lot of cities than they were.
Yeah.
Headlines were like, Plasmatics or Rule with tired old Kiss, and they weren't getting a lot of crowds. A lot of shows were canceled.
And they were playing some small markets.
Oh yeah, we played some small markets, but
Yeah.
it was a good time. We had a great time with them. The downside was that we never got a sound check the whole tour, and that was part of the reason we were playing with them, is they promised us a sound check.
What
But
and who was Paul responsible for that, or
I don't know. Who knows?
yeah?
Probably the whole band had part of
Well,
it.
did you interact with Vinny at all?
Oh yeah, Vinny was really cool. I always liked Vinny. I liked the way he played. I liked his style. I thought he brought a lot to the band.
Yeah,
Um, his songs were great. I thought his playing was great. Of course, he didn't get along with Gene and Paul, and
right.
they gave him a hard time. I mean, I'd go backstage after their show, and they'd be yelling at him, and telling him, he has to have better stage presence, and because he was wearing those big high heel boots, and he wasn't used to that,
He
so it
was
looked like
pretty
he
much
was
just
walking
thrown
on
in there.
eggshells.
I remember driving to the show and we didn't know if it was. We thought maybe Ace, because they had in the press that Ace Frehley would possibly rejoin the tour. So we didn't.
Right.
It
Yeah,
took us like a song. We're like, okay, that's not Ace Frehley. That's the new guy.
they
And
did that, I think for contractual reasons.
right, they needed three members in the band and everything. So
Right.
what was the interaction between Gene and you guys, and especially Wendy? Because we're going to go into the next album. And was Gene talking to you guys all the time, or
No, not too much. We mostly talked with Eric and Vinny.
okay?
Didn't see too much of Paul or Gene really.
So how
Uh,
did so this is where it becomes muddled because I
mhm.
really like the WW album, and I would like to hear your take on that because, but it the so that was one of my favorite albums in 1984, and I listened to it constantly. And Gene Simmons produces it, plays bass on the entire album as Reginald Van Helsing. But I'd like to know what your opinion of that album is because it pretty much broke up the band, right?
Right, right. Well, I like the album. I thought it was a really cool experience with when Gene came onto the project. It was a totally 180-degree difference from Dieter Dierks, where Dieter Dierks was a perfectionist and we'd rehearse with the click track and everything. With Gene, it was we'd come to rehearsal, would run through the songs once, and then that was it. Would go.
And he went
Uh,
for that Creatures of the Night sound, I think, with the big
right. Oh,
bombastic.
definitely. We went for the
So
big drum sound and a
how does
lot of space.
Gene contact you guys? If you, I mean, if he, because I was always the impression he struck up friendship on the tour, but you said you weren't talking to him that much. How did Gene come into the picture for this album? And
Well, he
how is it? Why was the Plasmatics dropped and Wendy? It was a Wendy solo project.
he approached Rod Swenson about it and said, he was interested in producing a Wendy solo album, and I think again part of that might have been the professional jealousy, and then part of it had to do with record company politics, because we had been on Capitol Records with Coup d'etat and Dieter Dierks, and then we parted ways with Capitol,
Okay.
so that had something to do with it. And then so Gene approached Rod about doing a album, but he didn't want to use the Plasmatics name. He just wanted to produce a Wendy solo album.
Okay.
And he wanted to bring in all his own musicians and
Yeah,
actually.
because everyone from Kiss is on it, including. So,
Right.
do you remember? How do you get Ace? Do you recall Ace Frehley coming in to do the solo, or
Well, he came in on a day that I wasn't in the studio.
okay?
From what I heard, he came in, he did a few takes, a few passes on Bump and Grind, and they used the first one. And I thought it was great. I thought he played a great solo on that.
Yeah, I love it.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then what about Paul Stanley on Ready to Rock? Is it just him and TC Tolliver playing?
Well, I'll just say this: his contribution to that track was minimal, and
Really?
that's all
Okay.
I'll say about that.
All right. So was that you playing on that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, because
I played all the rhythm parts on there.
I
And Paul came in, and it was funny when we were in the studio working on the album. Gene would come in every day and it'd say, "Oh, I'm going to get some guest guitar player on the album. I worked with Eddie Van Halen and Jeff Beck, and we're going to get a guest guitar player to come in."
yeah.
So he would tell us this every day, and so finally one day he comes into the studio and he goes, "Gentlemen, tomorrow we have an honest to God rock star is coming in to play lead guitar. Paul Stanley will be in." And we just looked at each other like, "What?" Paul Stanley is the rock guitar god that he promised us.
All right,
So
I'm
anyway,
glad.
I went in the next day and I sat with him, and they had just come back from Brazil, so they didn't have any of their instruments
Right.
with them. So he went next. So we were recording on Right Track Studios where they had just finished Lick It Up, and Manny's music store was right next door. So Paul went over there and he grabbed a Kramer guitar to play for the session. And he comes in, he sits down, he listens to the first track, he goes through it. I tell him the chord changes. He's like, "No, I'm not feeling that." We go to the next song. He's like, "No, I'm not feeling that." And at the time, he's eating a fried egg sandwich, and the grease is dripping down his hand. I'm just looking at him like, "Oh, what am I doing here?" And he goes through the whole album. He's like, "No, I'm not really feeling." And then it went back to Ready to Rock, and that's what he played on.
All right. So what does he play? Does he play the lead? Or
Uh, I'm not gonna say what.
okay, yeah, because
I
I
was
mean,
saying it was a
I don't.
minimal contribution.
Okay, yeah, all right. I'm glad you clarified that because I thought it was just him and the drummer because it kind of sounded like what he would noodle around on the Animalized tour. But all right, I'm glad you clarified that. I want to do like a book on this album and the Plasmatics and everything. I'm like obsessed with the WW album and the Plasmatics in general. But yeah, I'm glad you're setting this straight.
Yeah, that was a great album, but you know, Gene was. I could tell you all kinds of stories about him in the studio, and
So,
he was
so
like he was a minimalist. You know, it was like
yeah,
I mean, before when we were in pre-production, our original bass player Chris Romanelli was slated to play bass on the album, and he worked on all the pre-production, played on the songs, and then the last minute he had kind of a falling out with management, and he left the band like 2 weeks before we were supposed to go in the studio.
and what
So
about
he just
Richie?
well, Richie was still in the band at that time, but I was playing all the rhythm parts on there, so he really wasn't going to do much. He was going to do some lead guitar. So in the rehearsals, it was pretty much me, Chris Romanelli, and TC Tolliver, and Gene would show us some songs, and he brought a bunch of songs to us that really didn't fit, and then he brought some other songs that worked out really well, and then there were some of our songs. We had actually been getting ready to record a new Plasmatics album. In fact, when we were on tour at Creatures of the Night, after 2 weeks, we left the tour to go back and work on the album. And after 3 days, Kiss called us up and begged us to come back on the road and open for them
Okay,
because we helped sell some tickets. So
yeah.
we went back out there. So the whole idea was we thought we were going to record the next Plasmatics album after the tour was done, and then Gene came in, and it turned into the Wendy solo project.
Yeah. So, yeah, like half the songs are written by the Plasmatics, but and then some of the songs. How do you feel about people saying this is a lost Kiss album?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
It's more of a Plasmatics album, I think.
All right.
I mean, they like to talk it up as the Great Lost Kiss album, but only because you know many of the members of Kiss played on it, and there was
Many
another
members
song.
Kiss played on it. It's also better than Animalize. It's better. It's just as good as Creatures of the Night, and I'm a huge.
Oh, thanks.
No, it's awesome. But Coup d'etat is awesome too. Uh,
Hmm.
just a couple songs on there. I just wanted. So they throw It's My Life was the single off of that, and Kiss never officially released it as their own single. Um, how was that approach to you? And then you do the video and everything.
Well, Gene brought it to the band, you know, and we just worked it up, and it was a good song. And I played the solo on that, and I think it's a
Yeah,
really good song. That was like one of the first lead guitar solos that I did on that,
and
and
Thief in the
they
Night.
still play it. You know, Gene still plays it to this day.
Right, he played it on his solo tour. Thief in the
Mhm.
Night has so much balls on this, and then they put it on Crazy Nights, and it sucks. It's,
Right,
I
right. They
can't.
took all the life out of it.
It's not even the same song. But the real standouts are like the Priestess, Opus, and a CM7, Ready to Rock. I mean, Bump and Grind. The songs that you guys wrote,
Right.
standouts.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, Thief in the Night. Don't get me wrong, Thief in the Night kicks ass, but it's amazing how they release it on Crazy Nights, and it's just completely. How can they ruin that song?
Right, right. And from what I heard, Paul was really upset about that because he didn't realize that Wendy had recorded it on her solo
I don't
album.
get that because he's on this album. Like, how can you
I
know
know.
that?
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah, it's so weird. So does Richie lead the band because of Gene at this point?
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much that's it. He was a kind of a high-strung, nervous guy to start with, and
Okay.
Gene kind of just put the pressure on him. And I
Yeah.
remember the day he was coming in, he was going to play lead guitar on some tracks. He comes into the studio, and right off the bat, there's three other guitar players sitting in the waiting room ready to play on it. And he comes in and does it, and he does his tracks, and then after he does them, Gene comes in, listens to him, and he goes, "It's out of tune, it's out of time, it's terrible. We can't use any of that."
All right.
So he tells him, he says, "Well, what we used to do in Kiss is somebody else would come in and play the solos, and then Ace would get the credit on it, and you can do the same thing." And Richie didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
He felt that was wrong. He didn't want to do that, so that's when he decided to leave the band. And that was a really sad day for me because I had been with him through kind of the rock wars up to that point, and like I said, he was like the brother I never had. We were really really close, and it was really hard to see him leave like that.
Yeah. 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 I know. So, did you tour for this album? I don't remember.
Yes, we toured for it.
Did,
We started out, we did like 3 dates, so we got to Milwaukee, and uh,
is that when the cops shut it down?
that was earlier. That
Oh,
was
okay.
earlier
Yeah.
on. But yeah, we toured the Wow album.
Were you headlining or because I saw you in the, we're gonna go to the next album. I saw you in Commander of Chaos at
Mhm.
Broadway Jacks in Chicago. That was Wendy solo, and we were right up front. But I didn't see this tour.
Yeah,
So
we headlined
okay,
with the Wow album.
okay, all right. So you go into Commander of Chaos. What's the time frame? Because this was released quite a bit later than after it was recorded, correct?
No, no,
Okay,
I think it came out pretty much right after it was recorded.
all right. And then Gene takes one of your songs and puts it on Asylum.
Right, right. He came in. The idea was that he was going to produce Commander of Chaos, and he came in the pre-production session. He heard the song I wrote called "Party," and he says, "Oh, I like that song. I think I'll use it." And so that became "Love's a Deadly Weapon."
And he cuts the balls off of that song too.
Yeah.
It's totally it sucks. Gene's contributions in that period sucks.
Right. I always thought that would be a great song for Ace Frehley to do because that would kind of like stick it to Kiss, and it also,
Yeah.
I think lyrically it fits him.
All right. So Rod Swenson produces the Commander of Chaos album, and how does that go? I mean, what's the dynamic of the band at this time?
Well, we had for the Wow album, Gene Simmons brought in Michael Ray to play lead guitar on it. He was kind of his protege. He found him, discovered him in a band
Yeah.
in New York, and brought him in to do the solos. And then he stuck on the Wendy solo band, and then he brought in Greg Smith, who had been the bass player in Michael's band. He came in to do bass on the Wow tour, and we kept TC Tolliver from Coup d'etat. And Gene wanted to bring in all his musicians for the Wow album, but Wendy fought to have us play on it. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, are you talking to Jean Beauvoir at this time or no?
We've talked to him.
Because I find it odd, just ironic that he was writing with Paul Stanley right around this time, and writing songs with him too. But there's no connection there whatsoever. It's just random.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
remember we went to see Kiss on their Look It Up tour. They played Radio City Music Hall,
Yeah.
and it was kind of an uncomfortable time when Rod, Wendy, Richie, and I were in the elevator with Paul Stanley, and it was just dead silence. And you could just cut the air with a knife. It was so thick, you could tell Paul was uncomfortable.
So Commander of Chaos is released. Doesn't do very well. I guess the WOW didn't do well either, sales wise.
Well, I think it was kind of again saddled with Wendy's reputation. record companies being afraid of her.
Now I can't remember. Did you tour on the with her?
What happened was after the Wow album, and we were working on Commander Chaos.
Yeah.
Wendy went to do the lead role in a Rocky Horror Picture Show in St. Louis while we were working up songs for what was to become Commander Chaos.
Okay.
So it was the winter, and we rehearsed in this pretty much unheated loft in Manhattan, and I was pretty much burnt out from the whole thing. So I decided I was going to leave the band at that point.
Okay. Yeah, because I think I don't even know if there was a rhythm guitarist when we saw her live. It was a great show. But
Right. So right before they started recording Commander Chaos, I left the band.
all right, but you're credited on the album.
Right, right. I did do some songwriting on there, and I went back and worked as associate producer on it.
Okay.
Did the background vocals on it as well. And then when they were touring that album, they came to Detroit, moved to Detroit just to get away from New York and change of scenery and kind of change the whole situation.
All right. So what do
So,
you so at this point what are you doing and when do you get brought back into the fold for the Maggots album?
well, like I was saying, I moved to Detroit and I was doing some independent producing and working with some various bands in the Detroit area. I started working in a music store, and then Wendy came through, and I still stayed in touch with Rod and Wendy and talked to them all the time.
Okay.
And he came through on that tour to Detroit, and they asked me if I wanted to play a couple songs with them on the encore, and I said sure. So I got up and played with them, and then they went back to work on the Maggots album. And again, the idea was I was going to go back and work as associate producer. And I got back there to do that, and then he asked, "Hey, you want to put some rhythm guitar down?" I said, "Sure." And then they needed another song, so I wrote the song "Propagators" for that album. And, kind of got back into the fold for that album.
Yeah. So did again, my memory is foggy because I saw the Plasmatics. It was at the Exit in Chicago, which is way too small of a venue. It was just, it was a fire hazard. People were just packed in, and
Hmm.
I had to get out to take a breather. Were you on tour with them?
I played at the Exit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So I mean, I would the way I think you guys could have played bigger venues. I mean, how did that tour go?
It was a good tour. We played again. We played a lot of clubs. But the problem was we were on the smaller labels at this point. We weren't getting
Right.
the airplay, and MTV was real big, and any videos we did, they relegated to like 3 or 4 in the morning. They show them once or twice, and then that was it.
Right. And why wasn't Richie brought back?
Well, he had a solo band he was doing,
Okay.
and he was focused on that, and I just don't think that he wanted to come back.
Okay. So at this point, I mean, it pretty much, we know the rest of the story. I mean, what happens after the Maggot album?
Well, after Maggots, Wendy starts getting into rap music. She heard Blondie had done the song Rapture, which was kind of a rap song, and Wendy heard that, and she's like, "Well, I can do much better than that." So she started listening to some of the rap acts that were up and coming at the time, and decided she wanted to do a rap album. So I flew into New York, and Rod and I wrote the whole album over a weekend. And then I went back, and then we recorded it the next weekend.
Okay.
And that was kind of a fun album to do because it was basically just me and a drum machine. And then they brought in a couple of girls to do backup vocals, and a girl Katrina Astrin, who was a guitarist in the opening band for us on the Maggots tour. And she came in, she played some rhythm guitar on that and did backing vocals, and we had a really good time.
Okay. Yeah, that's yeah. I kind of it fell off the map for me. I mean, I do have the recording, but at that point I was kind of disappointed in it and moved on to other things. I mean, it was definitely different. It's
It
definitely
was different. It was probably one of the first, just as Commander Chaos might have arguably been the first thrash metal album. You know, Deafest and Baddest could have been the first rap metal album.
Yeah.
The Maggots was, you know, a concept album.
So then the whole Wendy has her battle with depression and everything. And so where does your career go after this?
Well, after that, we did, you know, we toured for Deafest and Baddest actually.
Okay.
And, we played the clubs, and it was pretty cool. And then after the tour was over, you know, we said, you know, we'll reconvene and we'll do something else. But Rod started to get involved in some more academic interests and kind of moved away from music. And I know Wendy didn't wasn't happy with that. And so I was in Detroit. I joined another band called Shock Therapy, which was kind of a electro punk rock gothic band. Was pretty wild, and was big in Germany. So we used to go and tour Germany quite a few
Okay.
times,
All right.
and that was good. But I did that for a number of years till the singer got arrested and ended up in jail for 7 years. So that kind of put an end to that project.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, tragic, it's tragedy what happened with Wendy. When I saw Gene on his solo tour and he played It's My Life, I was in the third row and I yelled at the top of my lungs, Wendy O. Williams, and he acknowledged me. And
Yeah.
he said, yes, God bless her. And yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I can't thank you. No, I would love to pick your brain some more sometime, but no, this is like a dream interview for me because your music just really touched my soul, honestly.
Oh, thanks.
As a hard rock and metal fan, you guys are doing something different. You changed different courses. It was just great. It was a maverick band. Wendy was a maverick person, a game changer that doesn't get enough recognition. One thing I want to ask you: the Miley Cyrus stuff. How did she get away with stealing all of your logo and everything?
Well, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it didn't really bother me. I think it
Was there
helped
any
expose.
copyright or anything? Or
No, I don't think so. I mean, it was just the font she used. So,
yeah,
but I think that helped expose Wendy to a wider audience.
yeah,
And it's, you know, a lot of young people today are just discovering Wendy and the Plasmatics, and we get
yeah,
a lot of new fans all the time, which is great.
yeah, and they should. Yeah, definitely check out the whole catalog. But my personal favorite are Coup d'etat, the WW album, and Metal Priestess, Beyond the Valley of 1984. That's just awesome rock and roll and heavy metal.
Thanks.
Thanks again. Where can people find you?
Oh, plasmatics.com is the best place to go.
Okay.
The whole catalog is available
So
there. Other things.
are you in charge of the band, or is Rod still involved, or
Right, it's still Rod's still in charge. I help out with the website and with the merchandise, and
very
if
cool?
any of your viewers want an autographed CD or record, they can order it from plasmatics.com and just put it in the comments, and I'll be happy to autograph it for them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope to talk to you again soon. Everybody, if you like this, subscribe, click the like button, everything else. And this is Average Joe. Till next time. Thanks.